Hey everybody, it's your old pal Sid again, back with another exciting video where I teach you how to make something. Only this time, I'm going to show you how to make something that only exists on my hard drive. I'm working on a project for the videos on my channel, so I thought I'd show you how I'm making the various parts of the project. Now, as the title card said, this is not a tutorial. I barely know Blender enough to make crude graphics I make, and I'm completely unqualified to teach anyone how to do anything in it. Now, before we get into the meat of this video, how's everyone liking the new format, where you can hear my melodic voice as I tell you a tale of how I made something while showing you how I made it? You know, instead of me typing every random stray thought that hits my head and put that type over a picture that almost completely blocks the video I recorded, like I did in my earlier videos. And yes, I know, I still type a lot of random stuff, but as Dalton says, be nice until it's time to not be nice. And he's a bouncer that drives a Mercedes, so he's one of those people that knows things. So I think of my new style as kind of a half voiceover, half pictures that pop into my head when one of my thoughts has its own thought kind of style. Because we all know only good things happen when I let my brain run around on its own. So let me know what you think in the comments. Or don't. I don't care. I'm not your mother. Oh, and hit that like, subscribe, and bell so I can get me some of that good engagement. And again, this isn't a tutorial. Like all my videos, it's just me making stuff. Sorry, no weed jokes this time. Or maybe there will be. We've only just begun this video, so who knows what could happen. And it looks like we completely missed me talking about modeling the coffee mug. For someone that hates the sound of his own voice, I sure do talk a lot. Maybe I'll talk about making the spoon. And while there is a lull in the music again, because I still gotta fire that guy, in case you're wondering, yes, I do script out what I'm going to say. It helps me with the pacing so I don't speak too fast. It helps me enunciate better. And most importantly, typing out what I'm going to say in advance keeps me from putting in phrases that will trip my speech impediment. Okay, on to actually talking about the project. I'm sure that, in between me inserting random pictures and text, you saw me put 3 different pictures of a coffee mug into the workspace. One from the front, one from the side, and one from the top. I used these 3 images to help me place the building blocks of all 3D projects, the vertices. Every 3D object has to have at least 4 vertices, which makes an object that kinda looks like a square Pringles. But most objects have thousands, and they have vector lines connecting them to create a lattice work of what are called faces. Now, for the spoon, I only needed 2 reference images, so that's what I'm working with here. I've already finished laying out the vertices in the front view, which creates a 2D object. Now I am aligning the vertices with the side view, which is what will make it 3D. Right now I'm trying to get the curvature of the spoony bit just right. And I know I have the video sped up so fast that you couldn't see it all happen, but it took me about 10 tries to bend the spoon without it either being way too bent or not bent enough. And all of this for a piece of the spoon you won't even see in the final render. Here I am finishing up bending the 2D front side to line up with the side view. It doesn't have to be perfect because, as any photographer will tell you, it is literally impossible to take a photograph that is physically accurate of anything in the real world. This is because of the curvature of the camera lens and also because of the camera's perspective. Perspective is that art technique you learned in 4th grade in between making lopsided God's eyes and Clay's ashtrays for your parents that didn't even smoke. And then you forgot all about it, which is why so many of us have a hard time seeing a different perspective from literally any other point of view. Hey, that was kind of deep and all philosophicalized. I just added some thickness to the spoon, which will make it look like it actually occupies 3-dimensional space. And now that I am done adding the thickness, I can finish up modeling the spoon by adding all the small details that make all the different silverware designs unique, like the swooshes and scalloped edges and random button-like extrusions. I'm sure there are technical terms for these design elements, and I'm even more sure that I am way too lazy to look them up. Now that I have finished modeling the spoon, I go into matte cap mode, which is like putting on a virtual ultra shiny fingernail polish that is made out of metal onto everything I have modeled so far. This lets me rotate everything around to make sure there are no problems with the topology of each model. Basically, it's shiny, it's fun to look at for a bit, and it lets me know that I have not completely screwed something up. Finally, on to modeling the coffee, which is the shortest part of the entire thing. All I do is duplicate the mug and add some vertices where I want the top of the coffee to be. Then I select all the vertices in the mug I don't need and delete them. Then I close the top of the coffee off and I just ever so slightly scale it up and I'm done. Now we are moving into what is both the most interesting and most boring part of 3D, shading. Despite what it sounds like, shading isn't like in art where you make areas darker to create depth. In 3D, shading is actually adding the colors and textures to the objects to make them look like something not made out of clay, which is actually what the base grade shading every object starts at is called. The first thing you can do before shading is set up your lighting, because without lighting, you can't see what you're doing. And I'm not saying that to be flippant. You have to add light sources in the scene or you can't see the objects that you're shading. Getting the lighting right is almost as important as modeling your object right, and honestly, it's something I'm still working on improving my work on in Blender. One of the most difficult parts of shading in any 3D program is a process called UV unwrapping. First off, it has nothing to do with those lights stoners use to make their posters glow at night. And even though everything is done on a grid with X and Y coordinates, they change the X to U and the Y to V because learning 3D isn't hard enough with having to throw out algebra and trigonometry. UV unwrapping is actually the process of taking all the vertices in your objects and projecting them onto a 2D surface. It's like looking at a finished origami and drawing the instructions to make it without flattening it back to a sheet of paper. It is a long, boring process, even on simple objects. So I sped up the entire process from 1 hour down to 2 minutes because it is just so tedious. As I get farther along in the shading process, I will move all the objects into different positions to decide how I want them to look in the final render. I do this because, just like in real life, the objects reflect off each other, and having them in position helps with the final tweaks of shading. And there are tons and tons and tons and tons of tiny little tweaks I make until I'm finally happy with it. It is a lot of jumping back and forth between Blender, Photoshop, and Illustrator, moving a pixel here, darkening some artwork there, all to get the artwork to fit on the objects and look just the way I want them to look. Here is a good example of how frustrating it is to do what to the outside world seems like it is a simple task. I'm trying to get my channel's logo exactly where I want it to be on the mug. And before I started using Blender, I figured it would be like Photoshop. Just copy and paste it on. Yeah, it's nothing like that. The first try I got the logo where I wanted it, but it was too small. And the only way to make it bigger was to completely redo the UV map of the mug to make a spot that would be big enough to enlarge my logo. So I had to completely delete the UV map that took me about 15 minutes to do and spend another 15 minutes redoing it. Then I had to export the new map into Illustrator to move my logo to its new spot on the UV map and also enlarge it. Then I had to take that into Photoshop to make a PNG file out of it. Then off to Blender to import the new image so that I could do a preview render to see if I got the logo in the right place and the right size. And I did, except it was backwards. So off to Illustrator to flip it, then back to Photoshop, and back to Blender, just to get a logo exactly where I wanted it. And then there's the node work, which is where everything actually happens in 3D. They never show you it in the bonus sections of movies, the node work that goes into making CGI look real, because if they did, nobody would ever want to do it. They are maddening to learn, and I'm just going to skip over a very long rant I had about them, because it's not their fault I can't seem to get them to work. No more than it was my fault my parents couldn't get the VCR to work, and yelling about it sure as hell won't make the tracking suddenly stop wobbling. You expected a blinking clock joke, didn't you? Even I'm better than that. At long last, it's time to kick off the final render. In reality, it took 24 minutes to do, but I sped it up to just under 2 minutes. I didn't really need to take that long, but I rendered it at twice the size I actually needed it to be, and I used way more samples than I needed to use to get the sharpest image possible. Just real quick, a sample is the render engine looking at a pixel and seeing what color it should be, how bright or dark it is, and if it is reflecting any pixel around it. The more samples you use, the more accurate the pixels are, and the better the render looks. Anyway, I hope everyone likes the new format. I'm trying to expand out of just showing me cutting vinyl and putting on a shirt, or printing out a printout and putting on a shirt. I'm wanting to go more into the area of showing how I design my designs instead of how I actually apply the designs. Of course, I'll still show you plenty of footage of my vinyl getting cut and me sitting there weeding for hours on end. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and ring that bell. Not sure what all that's for, but all the spam emails I get from YouTube tell me that's really important for me to get something called engagements. I'm already married. I don't need another engagement. Love you all.